From our nation's capital, welcome to America's Drug Forum. I'm Randy Page. We depart today from our normal structure in the show to speak at length to Dr. Thomas Szasz, Professor Emeritus of Psychiatry at the State University of New York. Dr. Szasz turned the world of psychiatry upside down with his book, The Myth of Mental Illness, and he's about to drop another bombshell with his new book, Our Right to Drugs, The Case for a Free Market. Dr. Szasz, thanks for being with us.
Thank you.
What do you mean by that title, Our Right to Drugs?
I mean by that the government of the United States, as it was constituted by the Founding Fathers and as it continues to operate more or less, does not have the political legitimacy to tell us what we ingest, what we drink or eat. Just like it cannot tell us what food to put into our mouth, it doesn't have the legitimacy to control what we take in. And therefore, I don't distinguish between drugs and food in this respect. It does not have the right to protect us from ourselves.
What about the business of drugs, the business of illegal drugs? Does the government have a right to tell somebody you can't sell drugs to that person?
Well, I believe in the free market in drugs. And therefore, that would be similar to the government prohibiting you from selling tomatoes on a roadside or corn. So that's not part of the government's business. That is, in fact, I view drug prohibition as illegal governmental activity, just as if it prohibited Catholicism or Judaism. It's not for the government to decide what religion to permit. And that's why, although this may sound pedantic, I strongly oppose the term legalize, because legalize implies that the government gives us a permission to do this thing. But that's not what the Founding Fathers said. They don't give us rights. The rights are inalienable. They can only take away rights. So that's what I mean by our right to drugs.
How would you respond to critics who would suggest that the government has a right, for example, to refuse providing an automatic weapon to a man who's known to commit violence?
Well, I would very quickly want to disassociate that kind of a metaphor, because a weapon's primary purpose is to injure someone.
Forgive me, I should also point out for our viewers that that siren is going on in the background in the streets in Washington. It was not dubbed in to talk about violence, but go ahead, please.
Violence. Now, we can, if we have enough time, we can discuss gun control.
I'm sorry, I did not mean to go into another area, but I just was wondering, do you believe the government has a right to restrict an individual for any reason? Are there any reasons that are good enough for a government to say, you can't do that?
Well, of course it does.
Okay.
I'm not an anarchist. In fact, the government doesn't have a right. The government has a duty to punish you or me if we deprive another person of life, liberty, or property. It doesn't have that right. It has that duty. It has fallen down on that duty because it's doing something else.
Okay, then for argument's sake, what about the drug dealer who goes up to a 10-year-old boy and says...
There is no drug dealer.
Okay.
We don't talk about sugar dealers or cucumber dealers. There are no drug dealers. There are people who sell drugs.
Okay, okay. So the person who sells drugs, let's say, to a young child, there are those who would argue that that person is affecting that other innocent person.
Hold it. I have made an assumption, which I hope people who listen to a serious show like this would also make. And I don't blame you for bringing in the conventional rhetoric. Children.
Devil's advocate.
Children, kids.
Right.
Merrill Lynch can't sell stocks and bonds to children. A real estate agent can't sell houses to children. We are not talking about children. Children do not have any rights. They don't have a right to freedom of religion. They have to follow their parents. We are talking about adults. So I'm not talking about children. Children ought to be controlled, first of all, by their parents, and secondly, possibly by some delegated authorities of the state. We are talking about adults only.
So how would you like to see the United States deal, generally, first, and then we'll get more specific, generally with the problem of drug use, the areas in drug use which are affecting people adversely?
You got my thinking and who I am a little bit wrong, because when you say how would I like the United States to deal with it, it implies that I am the sort of person who somehow would like to have some political power and tell people how to deal with this. I view myself in this respect more like a historian who looks back at what people did 50 years ago, except I am sort of looking at what people are doing now. And what I see is that the American people are scared to death of the freedom to have a free market in drugs. Now, if they are scared of this, who am I to tell them that they should have it? Just like the Iranians are scared to death of a free market in religion.
Where does that fear come from?
It comes from a 100-year war on drugs, whose foundation is the prescription market, not the illegal, not heroin. People are afraid of penicillin, of digitalis. That's what they are afraid of. They think they have to go to a doctor to get these drugs instead of informing themselves. You can be a professor of pharmacology, the local medical school, know more about drugs than 9 out of 10 physicians. But if your daughter has a little sore throat, has a strep throat, that professor of pharmacology cannot legally buy any penicillin. That is what I am talking about.
I see.
And there is no interest even in discussing this. When people talk about a drug conference, they always talk about marijuana. But marijuana is not even a drug. It's a plant.
But there were those who would suggest that there are chemicals in that plant that affect you as a drug would.
There are chemicals in every plant. There are chemicals in everything.
Where do you believe then, that, what is the biggest mistake then, do you think, in the basic moral tenets which support the nation's war on drugs?
Again, I would like to turn it around. I think people like to persecute other people. My feeling about the history of the world is that it is a history of persecutions. The only question is, who do we persecute? And it is particularly striking in this country. Now, I'm very happy to be in this country. I wasn't born in this country. I'm grateful for it. But I am well aware of the fact that this country was united for a long time by the hatred of blacks, called slavery. Then there was another backup of persecuted groups, women, who after all didn't get the vote until 60 years after blacks got it. Now, weren't they persons? Then I came to this country in 1938, and what happened 3 years later? Warren Burger, Franklin Roosevelt, the American Civil Liberties Union, all decided that a 3-year-old boy born in Los Angeles, whose grandparents lived in Sacramento, is a mortal danger to the US. So he's going to be put in a concentration camp. I wasn't. People from Germany weren't. But the Japanese who lived here were enemy aliens. Do you know what I call this? Scapegoating. Scapegoating is a metabolism of society.
So how does the present drug policy fit into that?
The present drug, in my view, we have what I called 30 years ago, 25 years ago, a therapeutic state. The imagery in our country is that the most important value is health. And in the name of health, it is okay to lock up people, to beat people, to deprive them of their constitutional rights, and even to kill them.
Now, of course...
And this is led by physicians, psychiatrists, and politicians. And if you look at the writings and the speeches of someone like William Bennett, you see a scapegoater. He actually said people should be decapitated. There was no outcry about this. Nobody said this is a metaphor. Nancy Reagan became famous for saying there can be not enough intolerance towards drugs. Intolerance towards anyone is, in my book, a sin. You can hate someone who does criminal acts, but in principle, to be intolerant towards a group of people seems to me an inelegant idea. Now, this is just the tip of the iceberg. How many red-blooded American parents think that the best thing they can do for their 19-year-old son, if he smokes marijuana, is to denounce him to the police? This is Nazism. This is communism. We have, in effect, a kind of a state chemical fascism in which denouncing people to the police, to the government, children denouncing parents, and parents denouncing children, are the cardinal immoralities. Now, this was done by the Reagans, who kept talking about family values. What's more important, the family or the state?